Hey, how are you? Good. I'm just going into the LRC representation reviews. No, no.
We're just unmuting and making sure that we're live streaming and everything's going well. Sounds like it. So, welcome today. This is a council meeting, but also hearings for representation review. And just a big welcome to all councillors who've joined us today, to all submitters, and we have some online. We have Nia Radich as well with us today in the chamber. Welcome to you. And to anyone watching online as well, big welcome. And to Stephen Hill of Elections as well. Great to have you here again today, and we'll be assisting with any technical advice along with Amanda Verco as well today. I'll begin with karakia. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki waho, tue ki roto, tue ki te here tangara, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, ome huie kai. Thank you, everyone. So you will have seen the order of, we need to actually do apologies and all of that stuff first. So Councillor Somerville is an apology for this meeting, and Councillor Laws is an apology for lateness. I can move that. Somebody care to second? Councillor Weir, all in favour? Oh, Alexa. Yeah, sorry, good point. We had I think we have had an apology from Alexa as well. I think she said she might be coming and going, but she's certainly an apology at the moment. So I'm happy to move. Yeah, we'll add her in. Thank you. So we got Alexa and Michael potentially for lateness, and councillor Summerwell, and we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put it all in favour. Aye, against, carried. Confirmation of agenda. We know why we're here today. Any declarations of interest? I think we're all in similar camp on that one, but need to make a decision on representation review, or not make a decision, make recommendations for a further council meeting. Yep. And yeah, so we're going to be having, after we have the submissions, a section where we have deliberations, and we'll have a chance to go through what our responsibilities are and what we need to be considering today. So I don't propose to do that right at this second, because we do have submitters here that need to get into presenting to us, but we will have a section where we do that. Submitters will have 10 minutes each if they choose to take that much time and they're welcome to present, and then we have questions of clarification. It's not like a debate or a cross examination with the submitter. It's just points of clarification on their submission. Without further ado, then we will have our first submitter today, which is Dunedin City Council and Mayor Radish to speak. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. The DCC, we acknowledge the population growth of Central Otago and Queenstown Lakes that make up the Dunstan constituency, but our very strong view is that the Dunedin constituency should remain at 6 members. This is my absolute key point and only point for today, because the addition of a member in the Dunstan constituency should not come at the expense of Dunedin and Dunedin representation. The Mosgiel, Taieri and Strathtyre areas should be moved from the Molyneux constituency to the Dunedin constituency for the following reasons, in our opinion. Firstly, there's a clear sense of belonging to Dunedin with public transport, education and employment links. Mosgiel has seen the biggest residential growth in Dunedin. It's much more than a rural support centre. Mosgiel and Middlemarch are fully serviced by Dunedin City with water infrastructure, roading and recreational facilities. The new pool in Mosgiel attracts residents from across the city. There are strong transport linkages, and politically the alignment is clearly with Dunedin City, as residents of Mosgiel, Taieri and Strathtyre vote for all DCC councillors via the STV system in an at-large arrangement. In addition, both Mosgiel, Taieri and Strathtyre have community boards and are supported and funded by DCC. There are no shared services with Balclutha. And while both areas have flood and drainage schemes, there are no shared schemes between those two areas. If Mosgiel, Taieri and Strathtyre are included in the Dunedin constituency using the June population data, the Dunedin constituency would be 134,600 people. If 6 councillors are retained in Dunedin, it would be well within the plus or minus 10% rule. So DCC is strongly of the view that Dunedin should remain at 6 members and that Mosgiel, Taieri and Strathtyre be included in the Dunedin constituency. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions, points of clarification for the DCC submission? Councillor Scott.
Cool. Thank you for your submission. What do you think about the thought that if Dunedin retains 6 councillors, the impact on the Molyneux ward would be that it would likely, if that structure was retained, would be just 1 councillor likely, and which you could argue is not very optimum. You haven't got a person supporting the other person. It's ideally, it seems to me that every constituency should have a minimum of 2 councillors. What do you think about that point?
Well, it all boils down to whether you think, whether everyone agrees that you need 2 councillors to represent an area. Personally, I think one, proportionate to the population is appropriate. So we only have, back in the days when we had wards, there would be 1 councillor from a ward, but it's dependent on the population. So I think the makeup of this country generally follows democratic principles, and representation is proportionate to the population.
Thanks. Just a reminder to councillors that it needs to be within the scope of the submitter's submission as well. Yep. Thanks, Councillor Mepham.
Jules, thanks for your presentation. I'm interested in the expected growth rates for Dunedin and Mosgiel. Just seeing in the paper, I think they're sort of saying there's a 13,000 roughly growth rate, people being added into the Dunedin population. What about, did that figure also include Mosgiel as well?
Yes,
or
yes, it does. So our population stats for the future development strategy includes Mosgiel, of course, because Mosgiel is part of Dunedin. And so, we are expecting high growth. So Dunedin has moved from being a low growth area to now medium to high growth.
So where do you see the growth coming in the population for Dunedin Mosgiel? Is it sort of through immigration, is it a natural sort of thing that's occurring, or?
Well, it's a natural thing that's occurring. I don't know that there's that much immigration moving there, but I think there's a desire amongst people to have new houses, and the city, CBD, well not CBD, but the inner city area is getting quite a lot of infill, and there is demand for housing.
So that increase of 13,000, that predominantly would be in Mosgiel, would it, or?
A good number of Mosgiel. I don't have the figures off the top of my head as to where the proportions lie. But there's quite a lot of infill happening in the city, and you can see that just driving around some of the developments. And there's a number of them, but also in Mosgiel there are areas opening up. So there will be substantial growth there.
Thank you. Yes.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry. Councillor Noon, then Scott again.
Thanks for your presentation, Jules. I just want to ask the question around, you're promoting obviously Mosgiel Tory to be incorporated into Dunedin, and you mentioned about numbers, and I suppose my question is around, in your view, do you think there's a difference in terms of representation compared to the TA and a regional council, because their focus is with a regional council on environmental aspects rather than council services, so to speak? And my point is around, trading one off against the other, which has been a theme coming through submissions. An extra one in Dunstan, one less in Dunedin, that trade-off should, some are arguing that shouldn't occur. But my point, do you think there's any difference in terms of the function of a regional councillor in terms of the focus, the environment, versus a TA focused on council services in terms of their role?
Well, I think there's very different functions in terms of the, I suppose, facilities and services that are managed on behalf of the constituents. However, and both, there's a lot of overlap. So, we're very concerned about the environment and what goes on in the environment around our area as well. And so, the number one concern, of course, is flooding on the Taieri and thereabouts. That is a very strong overlap for us. And so we're very, concerned about that, and, have a lot to do with, maintenance of the roads and bridges and such like. So I think there's a substantial overlap, and we're very much concerned about the same things. But because we are responsible for the infrastructure of the area that falls within the city boundaries, we think that representation, that additional representation, or that continued representation by 6 is deserved.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Dunedin City has more councillors, I think, than the regional council. How many councillors?
14 councillors.
14. And I think what you're proposing is that the ORC would go from 12 to 13. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, that's a decision for you.
Yeah, I think that's
How
the
you achieve
implication. I think what you said is that Dunedin shouldn't be at the expense of Dunstan.
Yes.
Do you have any concerns about increasing the number of councillors and the workability of that? And maybe because you have experience at the city, you know, managing 14 councillors, is it an optimum number?
I think
13.
the debate on what the optimum number might be could occupy us all for a week or two and still not get to an answer.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks. Any further? Probably come to the end of our, sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Well, I'm just intrigued, in the last term, you actually essentially had 8 Dunedin-based councillors on the regional council, with 2 living in the Strathclyde.
Sorry, that was I missed that last sentence.
You had 2 Molyneux councillors living in the Strathclyde
Oh, yes.
in the last term. Under your suggested system, you wouldn't have that opportunity again. Do you see that as a negative?
What's the last bit?
Do you see that as a negative?
No.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you very much for joining us today and for the submission of the Dunedin City Council. We will move on to our next submitter, but yeah, thanks for joining us in the chamber.
Anyway, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next submitter is online. I can see that. We have the Queenstown Lakes District Council and Mayor Lewis will be speaking on that submission, I understand. Good morning, Mayor.
Ata Maria. Good morning, councillors.
Morning.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if you joined us at the beginning, but you'll have 10 minutes to speak and we'll ask questions of clarification as well. And we're in your hands.
Brilliant. Sorry, the analogy is turkeys calling for Christmas with this. I've gone through it 2 years ago, so I can understand what you've all got to deliberate on. Okay. Queenstown Lakes District has been the fastest growing area in New Zealand since at least 1996, and our district's population grew by an astounding 8% last year. For perspective, the fastest growing city is Hamilton City, which grew only 3.4%, and Otago as a whole only grew 2.7%. The challenges the district face are compounded by a high number of visitors. We currently have a resident population of just over 52,000, probably closer to 53,000, but an average day population of 70,000 and a peak daily population of 99,000. By 2053, this is forecast to increase to 150,000 and a peak of 217,000. As a metro sector territorial authority, Queenstown Lakes District is nationally important area for growth, urban development and investment, a centre of increasing diverse economic activity and the base for an international airport, which is the 4th largest in the country. As a Tier 2 council, QLDC must plan and provide for growth under the National Policy Statement for Urban Growth. QLDC is required to work with other councils to provide sufficient development capacity and achieve well-functioning urban areas, which includes features such as appropriate public transport. The challenges and needs of this area should be viewed as similar to those of urban centres, such as Dunedin City, and do not align with those of large population and rural locations. The high levels of growth and tourism in the district mean that together with the ORC, the ORC has a key role, and together with QLDC must ensure to enable the district's transport and travel mode shift journey for current and future populations, protection enhancement of the environment and landscapes, and the district's appropriate emergency preparedness and natural hazard resilience is tended for. We need innovative solutions are needed to address the issues facing our district together. Rinse and repeat is not going to work. The number of elected members for each constituency is proposed to increase to 4 in the Dunstan constituency to provide proportional representation for size of the population. However, the Local Electoral Act 2001 requires ORC to ensure that the number and boundaries of constituencies will provide for effective representation of communities of interest within the region. The existing proposal meets the requirements for statistically fair representation, but it does not take into consideration where the population growth is occurring, nor communities of interest. It is in the Queenstown Lakes District areas around Queenstown, Frankton, Wanaka, as well as Cromwell and the Central Otago District Council that have experienced significant population growth that has led to the increased representation within the existing Dunstan constituency. These high growth areas do not share commonalities or communities of interest with the other areas in Dunstan constituency, such as Ranfurly or Omakau. For example, the public transport needs for Queenstown, Frankton and Wanaka differ greatly from those of more rural locations in the wider existing Dunstan constituency. It is clear that the different challenges facing the growth areas are a separate community of interest that require separate representation. The ORC's current proposal is statistically compliant, but it does not provide dedicated representation in the areas of growth in Dunstan. In contrast, option 2 in the ORC report does respond to the significant growth areas. To recognise the communities of interest around the urban hubs of Queenstown, Frankton, Wanaka and Cromwell, new boundaries should be instated to establish a 5th constituency. Ultimately, any arrangement needs to take into account the projected continuation of rapid and sustained growth over the next 6 years in alignment with legislative requirements to complete a further review. In closing, redrawing the constituency boundaries to create a new constituency, approximately the existing Queenstown Lakes District boundary and including Cromwell, would enable fair and effective representation of a population with a metro status and common needs such as public transport that are not reflected in other areas of the existing Dunstan constituency. It would ensure representation from within the area that understands these needs and the local context. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, clarification? Councillor Nolan.
Thanks, Glenn. Just, your main theme is focused on communities of interest, and with your experience and knowledge, the option that you're promoting divides, no, it doesn't divide, but it leaves Wanaka and Upper Lakes and Cromwell and Upper Lakes. And in your experience, those communities have a greater connection, in your view, with Queenstown rather than with the Dunstan, balance of the Dunstan ward, as per the map associated with option 2?
It is our view, yes. If you have a look at even Wanaka's residential growth, it's actually, this year it's faster than Queenstown's. But you've got to actually look to the future here. If you kick this can down the road for another 6 years, it'll be 1, it'll be 2. Like, the growth is actually happening in inland Otago, and it's centred around Queenstown, Wanaka, Hawea and Cromwell. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. Whether you can be in control of it or it gets taken out of your hands. It's as simple as that.
Sorry, Glenn, I may have couched the question in a confusing way, but I suppose...
Oh, yes. Sorry, I did say yes right at the beginning.
Yeah, I wasn't arguing against the growth situation. All I was suggesting was, does Wanaka have a greater community interest with Queenstown than the balance of the Dunstan area, i.e. Cromwell and now the balance of the area? That's what my question was really based on.
Well, look, over the last 3 years, I've noticed a shift in the Wanaka community. There is a lot of, let's say, movement from within, from the North Island through into Wanaka. Queenstown is their, let's say, their link back to whence they've come. Let's just say I make the joke that we're the South Auckland in some areas, and it's the same with Christchurch as well. The link is through Queenstown to get to Wanaka.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Thank you, Mayor Lewis. Great that you could join us this morning. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Okay, the third submission today is from the Central Otago District Council, and we have Mayor Tim Cadogan. I can see he's here as well, so welcome along, and we're in your hands. You have 10 minutes to present if you'd like to use that time, and then questions of clarification. Thank you, Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Mayor, Chair Gretchen and tēnā koutou councillors, great to be in front of you. And the first thing that I want to do today, and having sat through many submissions in my 8 years here, it doesn't happen all that often, is simply I want to congratulate and commend you for the direction that you've taken in your initial proposal. I think it makes perfect sense the way that you have lined it up, and it has resisted the temptation to gerrymander in terms of trying to move the deck chairs around to make people happy. I've had the advantage of sitting and listening to my colleagues, Mayor Raddick and Mayor Lewis. And look, I can't say I agree terribly much at all with Dunedin on this. The view that suddenly Mosgiel, the Tidy, the Strath Tidy has become incredibly important to DCC in terms of the representation in your chamber has to be balanced against the fact that I don't think, I won't say it's a fact because I don't know, but my thinking is that hasn't been raised since 1989. It's only now become an issue when the sheer weight of numbers is making a significant change. And those, I will agree with Mayor Glynn totally. The latest release of the census shows us that between 2018 and 2023, we here in the Central Otago district grew at 12.7%. That was the 5th highest rate for the 67 territorial authorities. QLDC was second highest with 22.1%. So 12.7 for us, 22.1 for QLDC. Dunedin grew by 2.1. And now that's exactly a third of the national average growth of 6.3. So I'm not sure how mid to high growth comes into it, with all due respect. In fact, if you don't count the Chathams, which are generally taken out of these things just due to their tiny population, really making the figures a bit flaky, Dunedin was second only to Wellington in terms of low growth over that period of time. So the polls have shifted, and the people are in inland Otago. And what you're doing is reflecting that. Now, I have some concerns, and I commend Councillor Scott for picking up on the Molyneux issue. If Molyneux was only to have one councillor, if that DCC proposal went ahead, that's significant. It really is. And the same applies if Mayor Lewis has his way and the Inland Otago constituency or the current Dunstan constituency gets broken into two, because what would be most of the district that I represent will suddenly have one ORC councillor. Two things, they're both big bits of territory to cover with one person, but there's also the time factor. I understand most councillors have other lives outside of their roles, but also not just professionally, but if one of those councillors becomes ill for a period of time, has an extended overseas holiday, there will be nobody if you go down to one councillor in either the Molyneux constituency or in a revamped Inland Otago type scenario with 3 up towards Queenstown and 1 for the rest. That leaves a significant weakness around your council table in terms of you could have meetings where there is nobody there representing one of your constituencies very, very easily, even just with the normal run-of-the-mill coughs and flus and so forth. So I think it's a real warning. We have 2 wards here that, due to their very small populations relative to the others, only have 1 councillor. And the burden on those people is significant because they're one of one. Being one of 2 allows for a diversity of views within the ward, and also just the workload's going to be a whole lot less. So I really think that wouldn't be a very good way to go. Also, Councillor Scott raised the question about the council getting bigger. If Dunedin gets what it wants, you add a councillor on. Of course, that's entirely your business. But I note that CODC has gone, we were in the same boat as you. We had the choice of adding an extra councillor into Cromwell or taking 1 off Vincent. And we took the 1 off Vincent so that we went from 12 to 11 instead of 13. And that was unanimous around the table that really it was beneficial to have 1 less than 1 more, just in terms of the size of the council. And I noticed Clutha in its current proposal, I believe, is looking at going from 14 to 9 in order to achieve some goals they want to achieve. So I don't think making the council bigger in order to meet the needs of one part of it is a terribly good idea. Moving to my friend Glyn, Mayor Glyn's comments. Look, there is some benefit to, if you want to call it Central Otago, in what he says, because there is a risk for us, and when I say us, say here where I am in Alexandra and the rest, Maniatoto and the Cheviot, that with the population growth in Queenstown and Wānaka, we could suddenly find that the 4 councillors are all based up there. I don't think that will happen, and it's a risk that I'm willing to run rather than guaranteeing that we would get at least one in the remainder of the district. I think the risk is far too great, and I go back again to that one councillor doing the role here, which would encompass the territory of, gee whiz, I'd be calculating about 8,000 square kilometres if you took the Cromwell ward out of it. So I don't think it's a good idea in that regard, because I know how hard it is as mayor to cover the territory we have at the moment of 10,000 square kilometres. It would be really the communities of interest. Again, I come back to section 19U. Well, I'm not coming back to it because I haven't mentioned it yet. But section 19U says where possible, you should keep the boundaries within the CODC. So it's quite handy for QLDC with respect to try to pinch Cromwell and say, oh no, Cromwell, gee, that's really a part of us when it suits. I think that would be more the case. And we have here at Central Otago District, just in the last fortnight, changed our governance structure to make us more 1 rather than 4 wards, which has been a significant move. So we're bringing ourselves tighter while QLDC is trying to say, well, hey, if we take that ward, I presume it would be the Cromwell ward as it stands, I just don't think that's a good idea. And in terms of community of interest, there's a lot of movement within the whole of Inland Otago, but I could step out of my office right now into just the small corner of our building. My PA comes from Cromwell. The head of HR in the room right next to me come from Cromwell. I think there's 3 out of about the 8 of us in this corner that come from Cromwell. There is a massive amount. My son and my mokopuna live in Cromwell. At a personal level, there is a huge amount of community of interest between the 2 of us that I think QLDC it likes to say that's the case. I don't genuinely believe it is. And I think if you ask people from Cromwell if they're from Central Otago or from Queenstown, you would get a fairly loud and resounding Central Otago, even though I may well have annoyed many of them with our distritisation debate last week. So look, again, I come back to where I started. I congratulate and commend you on just looking at the reality of the situation and seeing the best way forward. One other thing that I would point out in terms of Mayor Glyn's argument is that you're an environmental council. You're the regional council. If you were further south, you'd be Environment Otago in your name instead of Otago Regional Council, but that's where it lies. And the talk of Queenstown being a metro, sure, Cromwell isn't. Cromwell certainly isn't. So I think the community of interest argument is defeated simply by that. It's convenient, much the same as sucking Strathtyre and Tidy back into DCC is convenient for the sake of the numbers. You've looked at this honestly and well done. So I think my 10 minutes are up, Chair Gretchen.
Thank you very much. That was perfect timing wise. So any questions of clarification? Yes, and also just I just do want to comment on process as well, that there are some matters that have probably been raised today that are outside the scope of the original submission that was made, and probably some as well where submitters have commented on other people's submissions, and so we will be taking fairness into account when we're deliberating as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we will be going through what our responsibilities are in decision making and ensuring that we've got a really fair and robust process. So just thought I'd mention that, but sorry, Mayor, I did not want to cut you off on questions, and we have got some. Councillor Wilson.
Mine isn't a question. I just want to leave to the last moment, but just wished him all the best. It's the last time I think he'll be appearing for us in this role, and I've enjoyed our interchanges, but I just wanted to wish him all the best.
Oh, that's, yeah, well done, Councillor Wilson, and we do want to wish Mayor Cadogan all the very best. That's a very exciting opportunity. No doubt we'll have other moments to do that as well. Any questions on his submission? that appears not to be. So a clear submission. Thank you very much for appearing as well before us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Gretchen. And if I can just take 30 seconds to thank the councillors, and in particular you, Chair Gretchen, for the relationship we've had, particularly over the last 3 years, but in my 8 years, we've had some tough cordedo between my council and your council, but we're having the cordedo, and that's the important bit. So I commend all of you in the hard work that you do and wish you all the best for the future. And I'm really chuffed that my new role keeps me in the local government family. So while I may not be a brother mayor, I'll be a distant cousin, and I might still see at some of the family gatherings. So
thank you very much.
Deliberations today.
Yeah, really look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, we have Simon Telfer as well, has appeared on screen and is submitting on behalf of himself, I believe, today. Thanks, Simon. We're in your hands. 10 minutes, and then questions of clarification. Over to you.
Kia ora. Morena, thank you, Gretchen. I am speaking, I put my own personal submission in, although I do have the benefit, as you know, of being able to be the chair of the Wanaka Upper Clutha Community Board, so that has influenced my thinking and my support for you giving a real serious consideration to a strong community of interest up here in the Wanaka Upper Clutha, Queenstown area for creating that 5th constituency. There was a question before, and I think there is certainly alignment between Wanaka and Queenstown compared to having someone represent us from, say, north of Rays Junction or Kyburn or Millers Flat. So I think when you look at that community of interest and you look at things like public transport, you look at deep water lakes, there is very much alignment between Queenstown and the Upper Clutha. I went through the submissions. There was 55 in support of the council giving serious consideration to the creation of a new constituency here, 55 out of 160 odd, so that's a third. I think that's meaningful. I think that should be given its provenance and should be really given respect there, that that number of people have strongly indicated that the council take into account the desires here, particularly in Upper Clutha and Queenstown, to have a different representation here. From a personal note, ORC has a poor reputation here in Wanaka, I'll be honest, and one of the problems is it's just not visible. I think if I go down the street and ask what ORC does, I'd get a sporadic answering that might be correct. I appreciate, Gretchen, you reached out to the community board and you came up and we had that morning tea and we had that korero, and that was really, really good. But unfortunately, it's the disparity of what ORC does, and that connection to the Upper Clutha community is just getting wider and wider. And I think that representation here and having people visible here and having its own constituency, I think could create validity and credibility. I don't mean that in a statutory sense, I just mean it from a on-the-ground public profile sense. So I do think that that's missing here. I think it's really, really unfortunate. And I do think that the needs of the wider Dunstan rural community versus a rapidly growing Wanaka community that's doubled in size since I've been here in 8 years, the increase in challenges around Hawea, Luggett, challenges across in Queenstown, and I think it was a little bit unfair on Tim to cherry pick his things as well. And I won't comment on his submission because I think it was unfair that Glyn didn't have the right of reply, but I do note that that connection between Cromwell and Queenstown and Cromwell and Wanaka is only getting stronger and stronger, and you only need to look at that between the connections between the schools, between work, and dare I say it, the traffic that's on the road, that's showing that the connection between that triangle is stronger and stronger. So I won't speak any further other than I was disappointed that the option for the Upper Clutha and Queenstown new constituency wasn't put as a recommendation or the ability to be part of the original draft presentation that you put out, but I'm pleased it's now made its way into the staff's optionality for you, and I would just encourage that it was given really serious consideration. And I think for the benefit of ORC and the connection with the Upper Lakes community, I'd encourage you to consider that 5th constituency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Simon? Here, oh no, Councillor Wilson.
Just understanding, getting someone elected does also depend on who stands. And I think in the last 2 elections, but I may have this wrong, only one person from the larger Wanaka area had stood in each election. I could have that wrong. There was only one last time. So I'm slightly confused as to whether the people standing share that frustration or in getting that representation. Was it that unfair?
Yeah, you raise a really good point, Kate, and you can create new boundaries. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, you can create new boundaries, but you need individuals to stand. I'll be honest, even the naming of the Rohe or Dunstan, there is just no connection between Wanaka and Dunstan. It feels an anathema. And because we've had a lot of new people to town, as I said, that, from 8 years ago, 1 and 2 people weren't living here in the Upper Clutha area. It's amazing that Dunstan is just unfamiliar. So I think there is that sense of connection. I think that's that sense of what does ORC do, and I'm going to reverse it around and saying that if there was a ward here that was named and recognised as representing this part of the Otago community, we would get more people standing. I am sure of that. There is just a disconnect at the moment.
Thank you. It's an interesting problem.
Thank you. No further questions at this point, I don't believe. So once again, thank you so much for joining us and joining us online in person. That's really great. And for your original submission. Thank you.
Christian.
Bye-bye. Right, at this point, we have a short break programmed. No further, I'm just double checking. We've had no late comers wanting to present in person or no, great. Okay, so I will move that we have a short adjournment for, might as well take, 15 minutes? Sorry.
10 to.
Oh, okay, sorry. 10 minutes, 10 to, yep, great. Well, I'll move that we adjourn. Somebody want to second that? Councillor Noon, all in favour? Aye, against, carried. Thank you.
What was more on you mean? People.
Hi, Duncan. You're probably wondering why you can't hear anything. We're just muted while we Okay, good morning. We are back into our submitters who are presenting in person today, in person online or in person in the chamber. We've got both, and our next submitter is going to be Duncan Eddy, who is representing the West Harbour Community Board. Welcome, Duncan. I can see you're there. You will have 10 minutes to speak to us on your submission, and we will have a short amount of time to, oh, sorry, didn't turn my mic on, to ask points of clarification of you. And just a reminder that there will be no cross-examination style of questioning, and that submitters stick to their submission as well. Thank you very much. We're in your hands.
Kia ora, can you all hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great, all right. Yeah, my name's Duncan Eddy. I'm presenting this submission on behalf of the West Harbour Community Board. And by the way, thanks for the opportunity to present this remotely. I've been pretty hammered with a lurgy for the past few days. I didn't want to come and read it to all you councillors. So the West Harbour Community Board submits that all Otago Regional Council constituencies should have representation levels that reach the representation levels stipulated in the Local Government Act for the 2025 and 2028 local body elections. Cutting Dunedin's representation by 1 fails to meet this requirement, as does leaving Dunstan's representation unchanged. We submit that Dunedin should have 6 councillors and Dunstan should have 4. And this is based on the population growth projections in the future development strategy, which show that if Dunedin lose 1 representative, the upper allowable limit set out in the Local Government Act will have already been exceeded by the time that the 2025 elections are held. We also believe that taking into account the weighting allowed for communities of interest, Dunedin has a very strong case here, because we have arguably the greatest single community of interest within the Otago Regional Council catchment area. That's the identity of being a Dunedinite. We also have the greatest amount of diversity of communities of interest within Dunedin, and for that reason, we're really concerned about the potential loss of representation within our constituency. We acknowledge that Dunstan is currently underrepresented, and that needs to be sorted out. But moving the disparity from Dunstan to Dunedin isn't an enduring solution. The next representation review isn't until 2030, so we'd be stuck with being underrepresented for at least 2 elections. And we're also concerned that this proposal could set an alarming precedent for future representation reviews. Finally, I'd just like to point out that we're not opposed to a restructuring of the constituency boundaries, as long as fair and equitable representation for all constituencies is ensured up to the next representation review in 2030, within the range stipulated in the Local Government Act and taking into account population growth projections. That's us. Thanks.
Tthank you very much, Duncan. Any questions of clarification? Councillor Weir.
Kia ora, Duncan. Just in your submission, when you refer to Dunedin, are you referring to Dunedin the city or Dunedin the ORC constituency?
Both, both actually. I'm aware that the constituency that you call Dunedin doesn't include Mosgiel, but we're actually kind of are referring to both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we know how the growth projections compare with the actual statistics?
I personally don't. I'm just referring to the future development strategy, which Otago Regional Council and Dunedin City Council put together and base all their planning on for the next few decades. And that makes it pretty clear that by the 2025 election, if you cut one councillor from the Dunedin constituency, we're not going to have the representation levels stipulated in the Local Government Act. It seems to the West Harbour Community Board that the future development strategy is a pretty strong document to base our submission on.
Thank you. Doesn't appear to be any other questions. So thank you very much, Duncan, for coming along and presenting. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for your time. And I'll just reiterate that I have been hammered pretty hard by a lurgy. So if you found the argument that I presented slightly unconvincing, you can add an extra 25% on taking into account the lurgy, and the argument was totally convincing. Thank you for your time.
Right, yeah. Thanks
Bye.
very much, Duncan. Awesome. Right, the next person then. I'm not sure whether they are there yet. We're looking for Harriet Jock representing Federated Farmers. No?
She might be dealing with that.
Yeah, there's lots of weather issues happening around the region at the moment. So
We've still got 3 minutes.
perhaps, might just adjourn again then let's go until 10 o'clock, so anyone that's online knows what's happening, and we'll see whether Harriet's there by then. Thank you. I'll move to adjourn. Councillor Noon seconding. All in favour? Aye. Harriet. I'm going to unmute. Hello, Harriet, and welcome along to, turn my mic on. Hopefully you're hearing us now. We were just muted for a little while we, rounded everyone up again. So, welcome along to Representation Review hearings, and we have your written submission for Federated Farmers. You will have 10 minutes to present that, and we will ask questions of clarification, but no cross-examination at the end of that. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gretchen. And I will just introduce Simon Davies, who is online as well. He is a member of the Otago Executive and a former provincial president. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today on the representation review. You'll see that Federated Farmers recommends that the proposal to reduce the number of Dunedin councillors by 1 and add 1 councillor to the Dunstan constituency is adopted. This is to comply with the Local Electoral Act, which requires that communities of interest have effective representation. And a community is defined as a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. The Dunstan constituency is largest by area, and I actually wonder if it's the largest constituency in New Zealand. I'm not sure if anyone has had the chance to look at that, but it's a very large constituency. This, combined with its diverse landscape, its diversity of land uses, and external pressures, including from urban communities, means that strong representation continues to be crucial in the regional council forum. Good geographic representation is essential to provide localized knowledge of environments and communities and ensure effective decision making. The Otago Regional Council is working to implement a controversial land and water plan prior to the amendments of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. We understand that the Council is not seeking to understand the costs to the region, communities and families, but the costs have the potential to substantially affect the economic and social viability of our area. You will have received the letter from Beef and Lamb in September, and I encourage you all to reread it. I heard last week that it takes on average 7 times before you start to digest something. In that letter, it outlines that the economic work program ahead of the Land and Water Plan was in the year 2019-2020. In that year, farm profit before tax was 221,000. From that amount, interest is paid drawings for the farm owner, as well as capital items, which includes fencing.
Sorry, Harriet, I'm just going to need to interrupt because I think you're bringing in something that wasn't in your submission and is relying on somebody else's. It's new, basically new evidence into a process. We're just trying to have really robust process, but
oh, that's okay, Gretchen. I wasn't meaning to.
I know. Sorry, I'm not trying to throw you off. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I guess the point was that for elected representatives that live in a community, they know the pressures from the outset. You know, they see rural families struggling to pay for school uniforms or ski lessons, and they see diversification of land use arising from financial pressure. And so that all comes back to our point about effective representation of rural communities, which is necessary to ensure appropriate oversight and equity within the council. I wasn't meaning to be provocative, and I do apologise if it was taken that way.
No, totally fine. Just highlighting we need to have strong processes, and that's beneficial for your submission too. And I know you want to have a strong submission. So yeah, thank you.
So I guess I did prepare. I just let me know if this is also inappropriate. In preparation for today, I reread Simon Upton's paper "Going with the Grain" and had a look at Landcare Trust to see what catchments are in the Dunstan constituency, and there are a number of catchment groups which all have very different challenges that they are facing. So you've got the Manuhika and the Lindis, you've got the Taieri, you've got Cadrona, you've got Wanaka, Teviot Valley, Lake Hayes, for instance, which has very different challenges to, well, the Lindis. So I guess that each catchment has unique but important challenges to address, and to do so requires fair representation. And the only other point I wanted to make was that the Dunstan constituency holds a disproportionate amount of nationally significant infrastructure, such as the Clutha hydroelectricity generation dams. So it is vital that the varied communities of interest are strongly represented in order to safeguard the interests of those who live, work, and recreate in the constituency. For those reasons above, Federated Farmers recommends the proposal to reduce the number of Dunedin councillors by 1 and add 1 councillor to the Dunstan constituency is adopted. Yeah, so that's our submission.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Simon, you look like you're unmuting there. You're fine? You don't want to, you're not here to speak as well? Yep.
Not particularly. It was just I was on board really to ask questions if Harriet, or answer questions if Harriet was struggling with them. That was all.
Sure. Are there any questions? Councillor Weir.
Thanks for your submission, guys. I was just hoping if you could clarify a sentence that I just didn't quite understand within the written submission. It was just in that final the 6th paragraph around we query whether, given the more ubiquitous community in the Dunedin constituency, the number of councillors can remain at 5. I was just wondering if you might be able to clarify what that line meant.
So the above that, Councillor Ware, you'll see that we have a map of the area of each constituency, and you'll see that the area and size of Dunedin is significantly smaller than the area size of the Dunstan constituency. And combine that with the requirement under the Local Electoral Act to have fair and effective representation, it is Federated Farmers' view that you need to have more councillors in the Dunstan constituency.
Can I just clarify that? So was the suggestion there that there'd be less than 5 in the Dunedin constituency, then whether now or in the future or whatever? Was that what that line was meaning? Sorry, I was just trying to clarify that.
So we're just seeking that the proposal was adopted. We're not seeking anything in addition to that.
Excuse me, thank you. No further questions of clarification by the looks of things. Okay, well, thank you very much, Federated Farmers, and to you, Harriet, and to Simon for appearing today. Really appreciate that, and for your original submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. See you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye. All right, so we have come to the end now of those who want to be heard today. So we were going to have a short break just to enable us to set up for the next session. I know we've just had a short break, but we're going to have another quick one, 10 minutes again. And I will move that again, and Councillor Ware is going to second it. All in favour, aye, against, carried. Thank you. Okay, yep, we're unmuted everybody, so yep, we're back. And we are going to be now heading into a stage in this hearing. If we can just have quiet, because we are unmuted, and it is public. So we are now deliberating, but to put us into the right framework for that, we have got some slides which will be treated like a presentation. First of all, we'll be looking at the bounds of our responsibilities in the process through Stephen Hill, and then we're going to move into Amanda with some key themes that have come out of submissions. We might not have someone muted online. Just a minute. Okay. Oh, it's just echoing, sorry, through Amanda's laptop. It's all good. We'll sort that out. Anyway, we will have Amanda taking through, those key themes. And what we'll be doing through that bit is in your council paper, we've got recommendations there, which are built around the original proposal. But we'll be looking for whether or not there would be any amendments or alternative motions, I suppose, as well. So through going through this process, we'll be able to look for them, and then we can come back to the paper and the recommendations. So over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Chair Gretchen and councillors. Good to be with you again at this phase of the process. So just to run through, I guess, this is a little bit of recap, but also setting the scene for just the next phase of deliberations. As the Chair has said, we'll run through where we're at and some of the steps you need to take in considering all submissions. And that's important that we are thinking about all submissions, not just those who have presented here today. As you've heard, Amanda will run through some of the key summary of the key submission themes so that you have a wide view. And it's about that ability to take a step back from the process and look at the whole picture, look at the whole range of submissions that have come through. And then moving into a deliberations phase, and what we are seeking from today is guidance from you to allow staff to prepare the final proposal, which will come back to the council for adoption later in the month. And you essentially have two options available. You can either adopt at that stage the initial proposal as it is without any amendments, or you can adopt the initial proposal at that stage with amendments based on submissions. So what we are seeking today is guidance as to whether to prepare that final proposal based on the initial proposal unchanged, or to make amendments to the initial proposal based on submissions received.
Councillor Malcolm.
Of those two options, where does the status quo sit?
The status quo would be an amendment to the initial proposal, would have to be based on submissions. So one of those key points is that any amendments you make must be based on submissions that have been received to this process.
Councillor Malcolm again.
So can it be my opinion that a submission doesn't give me sufficient sway to vote a particular way?
Your responsibility as councillors is to weigh up all submissions and to see if there is an argument presented in any of those submissions that persuades you to adopt a particular view.
Thank you.
The basis is the initial proposal rather than the status quo we've got now, though. So yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
So you mean?
I'm happy.
Can I just clarify that for myself? Do you mean status quo as in the initial proposal?
No, just the status quo that we've got.
Like currently?
Yeah, the current representation model.
At the moment. Yeah, my understanding is that would be off the table because you've already voted.
Correct. I'm just clarifying that. Yep. No, that's good. No,
Thank
very
you.
happy.
We'll let you keep going, and we may well have some questions around process when we get to the end of that. Thanks.
Just looking at the timeline for this process, we've had a look at this previously. So we're currently at that hearing and deliberation stage, and we have a deadline in front of us, which is 8 weeks after the end of the submission period, being the last date at which council can notify its final proposal. Following that, just to look ahead, once the final proposal is adopted and notified, there is a period of not less than 1 month where the proposal is open for appeals and objections. So it's not another consultation stage, but it is an appeals and objections phase. Any appeals and objections would be received by the council, and they would be forwarded to the Local Government Commission in due course, and they will make their determination and hold hearings if they see fit once they've received those appeals and objections.
Councillor Known on this.
Stephen, you mentioned that submission process is not less than 1 month. Are we talking working days or calendar month?
It's a calendar month for that appeals process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, so just looking at some of the requirements for how you are to consider submissions, and this is guidance from the Local Government Commission. We'll just read through. Each local authority needs to consider all submissions received and must be able to demonstrate that it has done this by providing reasons for the acceptance and rejection of submissions. Amendments in a local authority's final proposal should be made in response to submissions, or else the initial proposal needs to be retained. Essentially, that's about saying it's not possible to introduce new material, new ideas which have not come through this submission process. This is about responding to the submissions that have been received, and if any changes are to be made, they must be in response to submissions. And part of the way that staff will write up the final proposal will be to look at the submissions that have been made and to note whether they have been accepted or rejected and the reasons for those. So that's why this deliberation is quite important, so that there is an understanding of why you as a council have adopted a particular position or rejected a particular position as well. And then just reiterating that final proposal date.
Councillor Weir.
Just in consideration of submissions, I'm just wondering if you have any guidance or information on how much we should, interpret submissions. For example, like there's some submissions that they're talking about the stats and keeping it that way, but referring to the initial proposal, and so they've submitted against the proposal, but all their information seems to be so they've said no, but they actually seem to be in favour. I'm just wondering, in terms of considering a submission like that, how much we read into stuff and reinterpret that.
I suppose you take the submissions on face value and you accept that the views that are presented are what the submitter wishes you to consider. And yes, that you often find in this kind of process that there is a range of views even within a single person's submission. And it's really your call as to where you sit in terms of interpreting or accepting those views.
Councillor Laws.
Couple of things. First is when you notify the proposal, the draft proposal, and that's what you submit on the draft proposal of the ORC. So that's fine. But then what that's led to is from some of the submitters, and particularly from a couple of the council, is a reconstitution. So, well, this is where we think you should in actual fact do it. And I've presented some figures, some numbers there. What is the opportunity? I don't know if those figures are accurate or not. So you would think that, well, let's just test that thesis if you are going to advance that particular argument. Where is the opportunity for us to test, or have we missed that opportunity? Should that something the staff should have done before today?
One of the comments I was going to make just as we move into considering the submissions is the use of population figures in particular.
Yeah.
And there certainly have been some submitters who have talked about projected population growth and used that as a basis for some of the comments they have made. Section 19X of the Act is quite clear that we have to use a specific set of population data, which is that supplied by Stats NZ.
It's current.
Which is the 30th of June 2023 estimates from the 2018 census. So that stands as the basis by which you take your population view. It's a snapshot in time. And we do understand that you may have future growth in the back of your mind as you are considering these things, but it is not possible to make a determination on the basis of that data.
I understand what you're saying, but that's not the case with the Dunedin City Council submission. They have used the current figures of the census of 2023.
Yeah.
Now they've reconstituted those figures in their submission. I don't know if they're accurate or not. That's their submission. Where's the opportunity for us to assess?
Yeah, so we have modelled some of those numbers in response to having received the submissions, and we have those available as we move through the deliberations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, move on to the next slide to introduce the submissions process. As you're aware, 45 formal submissions received, just by way of comparison, 2 in 2018, and 120 received through the online survey. There was a range of channels and media that we used to promote and publicise the submission process, both traditional and digital, and opportunities for people to use different channels to submit, to make their submissions. There were public notices, there was media coverage, and a range of information provided. As you're aware, there was a glitch in the process early on where the initial form did not specifically ask for contact details. And so we extended the submission period and made the alterations to the submission process. But we have presented all of the submissions to you for your consideration, so that they are all available. And we were able to contact some of those who had made submissions in the earlier process, and some have resubmitted their feedback. There are also some themes which are out of scope, and we can touch on those later, but issues around, for example, Māori constituencies, satisfaction with council services, those kinds of things are outside the representation review process and do not need to be considered by you. So perhaps hand over to Amanda to have a look at some of the key themes.
Perfect, thanks, Stephen. So I guess just at a really high level, there was a lot of support for the initial proposal as it was put out. There were submissions from territorial authorities, so we had Dunedin City Council, Queenstown Lakes District Council, Clutha District Council and Central Otago. You've obviously heard from Dunedin, Queenstown and Central Otago today. Clutha also submitted, and their submissions included, and as I've popped there, 2 were in support, 2 proposed alternative arrangements, and also a submission from Fed Farmers was received, as you heard this morning. So I guess at a high level, there were a few key themes, as I'm sure you've all reflected as you've read through them. There was support for the initial. Sorry.
Those ones are all right.
The rural's joining us in the chamber, that's okay. We've got some rural representation, that's great.
Different job.
No worries. Yeah, we've got a few things happening with weather events in the background, so thank you.
Can I ask?
You're welcome to ask a question, Councillor Callagher. Yep.
Sorry, I'm going to wait until you because you stopped. Then just in the summations there, is that a summation across the survey results and the submission results, or is it a summation of just the submission results?
No, it is across the full 165. The full 165. But I modelled it on both, and it was very similar proportion of yes and no's. If you're just looking at 45 received after 8 August, we've got all the contact details and all of the ones received before. It was a very similar ratio.
Right, so the formal submissions versus the survey one.
Yeah, what is that percentage? Sorry. Yes, no.
88.
Yeah, about that. Can I take that on notice and when I finish the presentation,
Sure.
reflect it back to you?
Yeah.
Councillor Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm just struggling with this without having the numbers. And I've done the numbers to make sure. I mean, if we're trying to work out proportions and percentages and what people really think, it would be handy to have those numbers. And especially on the next slides going through, because you've given them the same.
Have you just got it at hand somewhere, Amanda? You just need to find it?
Well, I'll just finish up because you've given the
Sorry.
next stages you've actually given all in the same size lettering and the same size italics and the same emphasis, but they need the numbers beside them to show relevance, which is difficult.
Yeah, so my understanding was that the themes need to be, all of the themes need to be considered. So he hadn't actually done that deeper analysis because it was also not as clear, it wasn't always clear cut, those deeper numbers. I haven't got numbers against each theme. I can find you the numbers for that top high level pie graph, which was giving the indication of yes versus no. So I need to go and do further work if you wanted number analysis for all the themes.
Overall's fine.
Mm.
But did you say 88%?
I guessed.
Yep.
Oh, you did.
Sorry, I just guessed.
He's very reliable.
Always you look at the blue and go, oh, that's 12%.
Unless you'd like to take the German and find that number.
Sorry.
Real quick.
Good on you.
I'm happy to take your advice. I just need to pull the submission down and just have a hunt for it. So it'll just take a few minutes.
Yeah, well, we'll do that. I think it might be easier. If some councillors are saying they would like that as we move through the rest of the themes. So Councillor McCall's moving and Councillor Noon seconding. We will adjourn for 3 minutes and all in favour. Aye, against, carried. Great, okay, back to you, Amanda.
All right, apologies for the delay. So that is a 17% no and 83% yes.
Thank you.
Based on 165 total submissions. Apologies for not having those numbers attached. So if we move into the key themes coming across the bulk of the submission. So number one, there was support for the initial proposal as it was. So reducing the Dunedin constituency from 6 to 5, increasing Dunstan from 3 to 4, but retaining those status quo boundaries, reflecting the current communities of interest. That was a theme that came through. A second theme that came through strongly through the submissions was support for the initial proposal, but with an additional recommendation of the creation of a fifth constituency in the Upper Lakes. And across the various submissions, the key reasons for supporting that were around the rapid and sustained population growth in Queenstown, Franklin, Wanaka and Cromwell, creating a community of interest there, and around the Dunstan constituency as it's currently established being too different to accommodate all of those different communities of interest. So the kind of argument was that actually QLDC, the Queenstown Lakes District Council TA area, with the addition of Cromwell, needs more of a focus around development, population growth, public transport, and the deep water lakes, whereas the remainder of the Dunstan constituency, one of the submissions talked about it being largely lower population rural interests. So it's just trying to summarise the reasons given across all the submissions for supporting the Upper Lakes constituency.
Was that largely based upon projected population rather than K?
Certainly point one was the rapid and sustained population growth was talking about the growth up until now, but also what the future growth might look like. But there are also those community of interest arguments around public transport, environmental management, deep water lakes, which are a little bit different to the population growth.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just in framing up how we'll proceed with this though, Amanda, so we've got key themes that are going to come up and we need to be harvesting some thoughts basically that can go towards reasoning. We will need to have a formal recommendations process we come back to, and that's the paper. But right now we're basically harvesting ideas and reasons. And then we would vote as well on that recommendation later on. So we don't need to sort that out, the outcome out right now, but we do need to have thoughts. Yep, Councillor Malcolm.
Yep. When we come to weighting a submission, and if we look at on this theme here, of the creating that theme, there was actually 31 submissions that were generic, that they were identical wording. Very bright people up in that area, but I don't think they'll get all the words exactly the same. So how do I weight that as against a submission from a group representing a group of people?
Based on your own experience and knowledge and skill, you take a view by your own call. Essentially, you'll give weighting as you see fit based on the strength of the argument, the supporting information that may support a particular argument, and take a view along those lines. But it's your judgment call.
Well, so just to follow that up, so if I look at, say, I have a submission from DCC, who it's clear and obvious where it's from, but none of the other submissions I have any idea where they're from or who they're from. So to me, that could be 31 that have just been done by one person. So I don't know that, and I've got no relevance to. So if you're saying based on my experience would be based on interactions and knowledge of people, and so I don't have that because I've got no idea.
I mean, it's essentially as with any submission process, you should treat all submissions with equal care and equal value. Clearly, there are key stakeholders that you have as a council, and the territorial authorities would be among those that you would give appropriate weighting to as well. But I think essentially you are treating all submissions on their face value as all having merit.
Councillor Callaghan.
So just clarifying that then, so across the 160 something submissions, if there's 30 and they are exactly the same wording, they would be included in the numbers as an individual submission, even though they are exactly the same. And any proportions you take out of that are that they are there as individual submissions. And so under the Act, that is how they would all be viewed.
The Act doesn't give any direction as to how you are to view those submissions. So this is where you apply your judgment and your own individual weighting as how you would assess those.
Thanks, Councillor Scott.
Cool. Correct me if I'm wrong. The weighing of submissions is not a numbers game. The weighing of submissions is based on the value of the submissions and the obligations you have to assess those submissions. So it's not a numbers game, whether it was 40 submissions or one submission that you found particularly compelling. Correct?
It can be a numbers game, but it is. Yeah, it's both, kind of. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's the intent of the principles of consultation that are set out in the LGA would back that view.
Thank you.
But yeah, quality of argument's important, and you mentioned that, didn't you? Right, Amanda.
You've got Alexa.
Oh, sorry, Alexa's got a question.
Yeah, and my question, Amanda, is there's an issue with the way the numbers are working at the moment that I see it, and I'm not sure if you have a way of fixing it. But from what I'm seeing in the submissions, Wanaka and Queenstown feel very much that they want their own representation and more representation from up this area. Whereas Cromwell probably seems to want to stay with, if Tim Cadogan is to be heard properly, wants to stay with the rest of the Dunstan region. But the numbers wouldn't work to separate it in that way, would it?
You're right. Sorry, yeah.
She's right.
We just need to also be aware through this what's our response. Sorry, I think this one's okay, but just to remind councillors as well that we are deliberating ourselves as governors and making decisions, and we need to at some point move from asking Amanda and Stephen for their opinion on things as well to moving to our own reasoning as well. But this one's okay. This is a factual thing on numbers.
Yeah, I think I can say that we did present those numbers for in one of the workshops earlier this year, and those numbers didn't meet the plus or minus 10% if you just had a Queenstown Lakes District Council, constituency. So those numbers were presented, they didn't meet the 10% threshold plus or minus.
That's correct.
The second point there is the legislation does provide for proposals that don't meet those numbers if there's specific reasons as to why, and we covered those in a previous workshop. And I guess the third thing I'd probably add is, keeping to the changes that council can consider today have to be from submissions in front of them. I don't recall seeing a submission theme around Queenstown and Wanaka, but not Cromwell. In terms of my interpretation of those submissions, but that's, that'll come through in further discussions. And we've got those we've got some number stuff coming. So that'd be my response. Stephen, did you want to add anything?
No.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I'm hearing that same thing, that Cromwell isn't so interested. But anyway, okay, carry on. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Apologies, I'm just a little bit confused where things are at in terms of this process then, because you as chair said we should be expressing our views and so forth.
That's right.
I still have a question in relation to the Dunedin constituency, which is not up on the
so we're going through theme by theme. At the moment, we're trying to, so all the main themes will come up. At the moment, this is the first one that's come up, which is a key theme, which is the 5th constituency for the Upper Lakes. We've been clearing all the questions people need to be able to move through these themes on what the process is. So if you've got any, but you can ask your question on Dunedin when it comes to Dunedin.
But do you want us to express our views on this constituency?
Reasoning based on the submissions, and it needs to be based on that scope.
Okay. Well, while I'm talking, I would say that I actually found the creation of a 5th constituency in the Upper Lakes argument to be reasonably compelling, where it said that the boundaries should be regarding communities of interest, and the compelling part is that it is an urban area with urban issues as opposed to the balance, which is more rural issues. I also found compelling that QLBC has experienced significant population growth way out and beyond any of the other areas that we're talking about, and that this Upper Lakes acknowledges that growth, acknowledges those specific communities of interest. And I also found compelling that the submission by QLDC, the submission by Simon Telfer as an individual, although he is chair of the Wanaka community, in terms of wanting visibility in the community. In fact, he said, even though it's not a numbers game, there were 55 of the 160 submissions. So I make that point, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and just double checking we're recording, so you'll have access to all these reasons. Yep, Councillor Wilson, then Laws.
Question, if I may, just on this point, in order that, and it's one I should have asked of Simon, my understanding with STV, because it is one vote as opposed to potentially three, a community of interest would have more chance of getting representation in Wanaka under STV than they may have had in the past. Am I correct in that?
Not being an expert on STV, I don't think I can advise you with any detail on that, but I think that does open up that possibility.
Thank you.
Possibly not something that was submitted on.
No, but it's not submitted on, but we had already done the STV decision, and therefore, if it does give a community of interest more chance, I would have thought that was relevant, or not. Yeah.
But we are still under an FPP.
Councillor Laws.
It is pretty much a numbers game, though, isn't it? At the end of the day, Locals Government Commission, and you'd have to have extraordinary reasons to move outside the variances that are set by legislation. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any reasons then on this one for compelling to move towards the creation of a fifth constituency through the submissions, or to stick with the proposal, I guess, or anything else? Yeah, we just need to gather the reasons. That's what and then
you've got Alexa too.
Then we will have amendments that come, and so yeah, we're deliberating at the moment. Yeah, then we'll tidy that up at the end. I can see I've got Alexa, and then we'll have Councillor Laws. So Alexa, you go first.
Thank you. I think we have got a clear message from Queenstown and Wanaka, and I just want to make sure that point is made. I mean, as Simon Telfer pointed out, they don't even relate to the name. Many people in the urban headwaters haven't ever heard of Dunstan. They don't know its history. They don't know anything about it. They don't relate to it, and they don't relate to our council. And I see that this is a compelling reason to look for a way of creating an Upper Lakes constituency. And we may need to look at a way of doing that doesn't necessarily include Cromwell, or have some way of communicating with Cromwell and finding out what they really think, and whether Tim Cadogan's submission well represents Cromwell. And I guess that time has passed. But I do think we need to look at that fifth constituency in some way, shape or form. Thank you.
Councillor Laws, then Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, all fine words and budding parsnips and stuff like that. The truth is that it is a numbers game. And you've got to, there are lots of strange oddities in a place like Otago. Just look at the parliamentary electorate seats, for example, of Southland, Waitaki and Clutha. They've all got disparate communities of interest. There's no community of interest between Belclutha, for example, and South Dunedin. They're in the same electorate. There's no community of interest between Oamaru, Wanaka and Cromwell, but they're all in the same electorate. There's no community of interest between Queenstown and Winton, but they're in the same electorate. So there are. It's the tyranny of the numbers game at the end of the day. This will solve itself in the future. The question is, it's just not solving itself now because the numbers don't work. Cromwell's given a very clear indication, and the mayor's represented it, that it doesn't see itself as part of the Queenstown Wanaka axis, but more as still a functional part of Central Otago. And I think that's reflective of the overwhelming view of the Cromwell community as well. Without Cromwell, it doesn't stack up as a 5th constituency, and that area, the numbers don't work out. The other thing that's worthy of pointing out is that Queenstown and Wanaka are so disparate from each other, and I need to point this out particularly to Dunedin councillors. They really don't get on. Wanaka almost could argue for a separatist movement. In fact, there is a separatist movement, a very strong one in Wanaka, to separate themselves from the QLDC because they believe that they have been mistreated by the QLDC, particularly in terms of amenities and development and the like, and consider the QLDC, which is 70 kilometres away and over the Crown Range at the earliest, as having a quite different view than themselves. And it is, Queenstown's very much an international tourist destination. Wanaka is very much a domestic tourist population to a large extent. But also, I would argue that Queenstown and Wanaka can solve this problem without us gerrymandering the electorate representatives. They just need to find quality candidates. Quality candidates get elected. And in the past, quality candidates have come out. Alex is elected still as part of Queenstown. Wanaka has in the past had quality representatives come out of there sitting around this particular council table. Brian and Gretchen have probably served with them. There haven't been quality representatives coming out of Wanaka. The problem, and can I also say this to Dunedin councillors, is there is, and I think, don't underestimate a very minor change you made to standing orders 2 weeks ago, which is huge. And that is Zoom meetings and the way in which that's changed. It's 300 kilometres from Wanaka to drive to here, to drive back. It's a powerful disincentive for Wanaka people to want to stand on this council for something that seems so oblique. But by Zoom and by an easier access to council meetings in Dunedin, you will find more people will stand. And if Mr. Chelfer wanted to stand, for example, the problem for everybody, and the one at Dunstan Ward, and Gary and Alexa and I know this, is that you've actually got to appeal to different groups of people. In Dunedin, it's simple. It's in some ways, it's one particular specific entity. But we've got Queenstown, we've got Wanaka, 2 totally different communities. Arrowtown sitting in the middle, different again. You've then got Cromwell, you've then got the Lindis, you've got Alexandra, you've got Roxburgh, then you've got the whole sweep of the Maniatoto as well. They are all very, very different and disparate communities. And whatever we do, they're still going to be different and disparate. And it's consequent upon those who get elected out of Dunstan to represent all those communities adequately. That's all I'll have to say on that issue.
Thanks. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, look, I think that the submissions that I've heard, and probably especially from QLDC, has actually reinforced me that our initial proposal is the correct proposal, where they bring in an urban argument into play, where if we look at a heck of a lot of the work that RSC are currently doing is in the rural peripherals of Queenstown. We look at the Glenorchy, we look at the natural hazards we're doing, we're looking at the Wilding Pines. That's all stuff that's is not urban. Buses, yeah, I'll give you that, they're urban. And certainly the bus argument between Queenstown and Wanaka will continue to fuel for quite some time. But in reality, with Queenstown and Wanaka having the bulk of the population, why haven't they had representatives? And again, thanks to Council Laws for reminding me of the Zoom meeting criteria. So I think, yeah, look, it's just really reinforced the diversity of this whole area, that we need the opportunity for a widespread of people on there. And Queenstown and Wanaka on the initial proposal will certainly have that opportunity to put very good candidates up, should they wish to do so.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Forbes, then Councillor Metham.
I just wanted to point out that I don't see the Wanaka Queenstown divide in the same way that Councillor Laws does. And I think that alluding to gerrymandering and things like that, just really, there's not a place for that in this discussion. I think Simon Telfer represented where Wanaka is at, and as chair of the community board, even though he wasn't in that capacity, but there were other reasons for that. But Wanaka and Queenstown generally get along. There is often an argument about Wanaka not being well served by QLDC, but that's not an argument for here, and that argument has never carried through fully. So it's a noisy, but not necessarily valid one, and certainly not valid at this point, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Now, Councillor Metham.
Look, I found Glenn Lewis and Simon Telfer's submissions pretty convincing. Population growth is happening in those areas, Queenstown, Wanaka. This whole thing's about representation, and it's all pretty much calculated based on population. It makes sense that we establish an Upper Lakes constituency. So that's where I'm heading with this. Thank you.
How are you going to do that?
Thank you. So yeah, the 5th constituency is laid out there, is what you're saying, Councillor Callagher.
Thank you. I'm not a fan of the 5th constituency. It worries me what it creates in that a grouping together for the, say, areas of Queenstown and Wanaka, and if the changes that will come up soon around Molyneux were adopted also, we potentially could have 3 constituencies all only represented by one person. And I'm not saying that those that are representing or the single person constituency we have at the moment isn't well represented, but it does create a big burden on one person. And so what we will move towards is rural Otago represented by individuals for their entire constituencies, and then urban Otago represented by multiple numbers. And I don't think, given we are an overall environmental council for the entire region, that is a good direction to be heading in. I don't think the case put up by Mia Lewis or Mr. Telfer were compelling enough to justify the change in Dunstan. So, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else have a reason for this one? Councillor McCall.
Can I just ask a quick question? Thanks. Is there any way, because there was 55, I think it was, people submitted on this creating a 5th constituency, is there any way you can find out what percentage of those people are that were residing in the Dunstan, currently residing in the Dunstan area?
Yeah, so no, not across the full 160. We could look at that out of the 45 received after 8 September, where we've got contact details, but I guess we've also got to be careful. We didn't ask people to
say where they're from.
Or say where they identify from. So that's why, again, we haven't tried to do that data analysis. And in 6 years when we do this again, or whenever we do this again, that would be something we would pay a bit closer attention to in that consultation process is asking people to identify where they're from in terms of what they're submitting on. Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
It's a question of clarification to Councillor Forbes and something that she said. I'm allowed to ask a clarification.
Yep, but you're considering the submissions rather than her. Yeah, well, that of the submissions. Yeah.
My question to Councillor Forbes is: are you promoting an Upper Lakes constituency that's just Wanaka and Queenstown, or are you being consistent with what's written here, where it also includes Cromwell? Because that's what the submission was from.
I realise that, yeah. I'm not necessarily promoting it at this point. I'm trying to keep the options open. I'm trying to listen to Michael Laws, who lives in Cromwell, and to Tim Carogan, who spends more time in Alex, but is mayor of that area, and realising Cromwell doesn't want to throw its lot in with QLDC for their ORC representation. So I'm wondering if we have enough of an argument, even though the population numbers don't stack up, and I know we can't operate into the future, because at some point they will stack up, and of course, as Councillor Laws correctly says, it will eventually sort itself. So what I'm wondering is if there is a way of getting there, even though those population numbers don't stack up to a community of interest. I also hear Councillor Callagher's issue around the single councillors in the rural areas. I suspect that's where we're going to end up anyway, but it will take time, and possibly the SGV system is going to deliver us there anyway. But yeah, so I'm not promoting anything just at this point, just trying to see what the options are for QLDC to have its own representation.
So I would subsequently like clarification from staff whether in fact it is an option just to have Queenstown and Wanaka as the Upper Lakes and exclude Cromwell, because my understanding there hasn't been a submission in that regard.
No, that's exactly right, Brian.
Check the submissions, but I think that's the case, isn't it? Yeah.
So sorry, there's nodding. We just need to confirm for the record as well that we don't think there's a submission on.
Yeah, so my read of the submissions was there wasn't a specific submission promoting QLDC TA area constituency. The theme of the submissions when they were talking about that in Upper Lakes Ward was around Cromwell being part of that Upper Lakes Ward.
Yeah. So Councillor Forbes, you're on Zoom. So do you get that your ideal is not tenable?
Yeah, I do get that, and we'll have to consider what the options are.
No, well,
and just for good robust process as well, if a councillor gives their own opinion as well, or even if they live in that constituency, that's not valid either. It needs to be from the submissions.
Yes.
So yeah, we're just
thanks, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Laws.
Can I just clarify that? We went out and submitted on a proposal. And our proposal was as it was, and here it is, and we've got the submissions back on that. But one of those is to create a fifth constituency. That is a submission from the QLDC in particular, of an Upper Lakes one, which includes Cromwell. But Cromwell didn't know that. So at no stage did anybody in Cromwell have the opportunity to submit on a fifth constituency, because it wasn't a proposal that was live. So if this was to be imposed upon Cromwell, that, you know, oh, by the way, you're now part of the QLDC lot and off you go. How does Cromwell feel about that afterwards? Is there a problem with the local government decision? Well, wait on, you've just made a big decision here. You've changed quite radically up in that part of the woods what you're going to do. And one of those affected communities wasn't aware that this was on the table.
It's probably helpful for Stephen to talk through the appeals and objections process. It happens once the final proposal's been notified.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, from our experience, that does happen from time to time where a council will make reasonably substantive change, and that is where the appeals and objections process kicks in. Appeals can be made by anybody who made a submission on the process, on the initial proposal. Objections can be made by anybody at all if the proposal is different from the initial proposal. So if the council were to go down that track, you are then adopting a final proposal that's different from the initial. That opens it up to objections from anybody. And so the appeals and objections process then becomes the step at which the Local Government Commission would consider the views of those who've chosen to make objections.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? It seems like not at this point, so we'll move on to the next one.
Perfect, thank you. So the next key thing that came from the submissions was around disagreeing with the Dunedin constituency reducing to 5 councillors. So there were some things around Mosgiel, particularly Mosgiel Tyree Community Board ward, having a clear sense of belonging with Dunedin, and it extended to maybe that also includes Strathtyre. And as Mayor Raddick said this morning, there are repeating the DCC submission, talking about those community of interest links between Mosgiel and Dunedin being stronger than Molyneux. So that was one suggestion. That was one theme, and the way particularly the DCC had proposed to some options might be to look at that would be to increase, one option would be to increase the number of councillors from 12 to 13, which would mean Dunedin could retain 6 councillors, and Molyneux could retain 2. The other option would be moving Mosgiel into the Dunedin constituency, so changing the border, and that then the population, either conveniently or not conveniently, the Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board ward is approximately 1 councillor worth of people. So if you put it in Dunedin, that would then enable Dunedin to have six councillors, and Molyneux would go down to 1. Or if you retained it in Molyneux, it leaves Molyneux having 2. And the other kind of comment on the submissions around Dunedin were that the majority of the OSC population overall, in terms of is based in the Dunedin constituency, and therefore it should have the majority of council representation.
Councillor Malcolm, then
Oh, no,
Laws.
right.
Okay, Councillor Laws, then Scott.
Can you run me through the numbers again? Because I'm going to be pretty much governed by that. If that scenario occurs, so we'll take the first scenario, which is we simply put Strathtyre and the Mosgiel area into Dunedin. There's a table that the Dunedin City Council have provided on clause 18 for that. Does that look accurate to you?
So what page is that?
Sorry, it's page 28, Brian, of my agenda, clause 18 of the Mayor's submission from Dunedin.
So from our presentation has got the numbers related to those 2 alternative proposals. So the first one, the top one being including Mosgiel-Taieri and Strathtyre into Dunedin.
Yeah.
So it's that top based on the population figures, and then the bottom one is moving to 13.
Okay, let's take.
No, I beg your pardon. So these 2 tables, one is Dunedin including Mosgiel and Strathtyre. The bottom one is just including Mosgiel and Dunedin, and then over the page is the numbers around 13 councillors.
Okay.
Which we presented earlier in the year. That was.
Can you take me back to the previous slide you've just done? That's the one. That top table is different than the one that the Mayor provided. So if you look at table 1 of the Mayor's submission, and then you compare that to the top table of the one that you've got displayed, they have different numbers.
Different population basis by the looks of it, which is what I think your point earlier on about what they were going on.
No, it says, no, the Mayor says he's using it on the June 2023 census figures.
Are we meant to be 18 though?
No, the figures are out for population for last year's census.
Yeah, but I think earlier on Stephen said we're all meant to be using the 2018. But
You can't use it.
You can.
No, not allowed to.
Yes, you can. So now, and this is really critical, because if you look at your upper table there, the plus or minus is 11.67%. Now, my experience with local government commissioners, they don't like to move beyond 10. And it's 10.9% with the mayors. So it's almost a whole percentage difference. That also relates to the Dunstan constituency, which under this proposal is 5.7, under this one is 7.2.
Yeah, without understanding what specific figures they've used as the basis for their numbers, we do occasionally see variation from rounding and from the way that wards and constituencies are grouped within council, and the Stats NZ and the LGC themselves say there is occasionally variation in terms of the way the numbers are collated. They're relatively close. The levels of compliance and non-compliance don't change with the differences between them. So we'd have to look and see what their population source was, but I'm confident that the numbers that we have
Oh, are you?
pretty
What
accurate.
have you based yours on? Have you based yours on the 2018 census or the 2023?
The same figures.
2018 census, June 30th estimates. So June 2023 estimates from the 2018 census.
Okay, but there's population figures have since been published, maybe since in actual fact we've developed this proposal by Stats New Zealand. So I would imagine the local government commission will work off published stats, which was what are the population stats in June 2023. Yeah.
So the stipulation from the commission is that for this round of representation reviews, councils are using the June 2023 estimates based on the 2018 census, partly because a number of councils will have already completed their process before these before the latest stats figures. So that's the set of the data that we're using. So I think we'd have to look, and if they've been using the 2023 census data, that's probably where the variation is.
Okay, all right. Now let's go to Morineux. On that proposal, the first proposal, scenario 1 that the mayors or the Dunedin City Council, have put forward, the variance for Molineux is 11.7% negative. So in actual fact, it's beyond that. My understanding, as I said to you, the Local Government Commission doesn't like to move beyond 10. That's sort of the variance number. Is that correct?
That's the requirement under the Act, but the Act also provides exemptions. And so if the council believes that it to achieve effective representation, it needs to be outside that 10% range plus or minus, then the council can put an argument in its proposal as to the reasons why sticking or going outside the 10% requirement helps to achieve effective representation.
And that's exactly what I want to test next. But our argument on that is, if we were to go outside the variance, it's because we want to have 6 representatives in Dunedin. Correct?
If that's the call that you make, then that would be yes, that would be around that would be an effective representation argument based on 6.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Mepham.
Just around that, yeah, it would be. I mean, Dunedin would grow in terms of its coverage. So you've got 6, but it would be like still having Kate as part of the Dunedin constituency. She still represents the Middlemarch and Strathtorrey area. It's just Dunedin, in essence, has still lost 1, but gained 1 through Strathtorrey.
No, it's not the question I was asking. So the point that I was trying to make is, when you change something under the proposal and you argue in front of the Local Government Commission, you've got to have a reason, a good reason to move outside the 10%. I'm just questioning, and that's the question, if the argument is good enough that we just simply want to increase the number of representatives from 5 to 6 in Dunedin. And so I was just testing the quality of that argument to convince the Local Commission to move outside the Act, which is a big thing for them to do.
We need it. Whoops, I wasn't doing it either, but we need to remember our mics. And Councillor Malcolm, you were next, then Councillor Wilson, and then Scott.
If the DCC proposal to bring in the Strathtorrey and Mosgiel into the Dunedin boundary, does that guarantee a representative from the Mosgiel and Strathtorrey area will be elected?
No, it doesn't.
Things of Kate Stephen.
It doesn't.
All right, okay.
Well, it absolutely doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, 24th a reason. That'd be good. Yep. Councillor oh no, Laws has spoken. Wilson and then Scott.
Oh, no, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, right. No.
Sorry.
Yep. Thanks.
Frustrated, probably.
Yep.
Sorry. The West Harbour submission, where they said that if there were 5 councillors in Dunedin representing Dunedin, that it would be the percentage 10% would be exceeded by in 2025. Is that true? And which table should I be looking at?
Also, can we consider that in our decision making, the future potential population?
Yeah, again, it's the current population data set that you must make your determination on.
We can't
So are
consider
you-
if in 10 or 20 years or whatever, population's something different.
So you're saying we can't, that's not,
That
that's not,
you must
relevant.
make your determination based on the current population data, that which is the June 2023 estimates from the 2018 census. I think the Act recognises that you will have in the back of your minds, population growth, but I think one of the key things they're trying to avoid is the scenario where the council makes a decision on future population projections, which then don't eventuate.
Councillor Malcolm.
Just for clarity, did we not hear from a submitter that the future Dunedin strategy figure for population growth was actually not obtained, and that the actual growth rate was well below that what was in that's in that document? So the actual figures were well below what was on the proposal from West Harbour.
Yeah, so we're considering the actual figures for Dunedin on the 2023 estimate. So that's what we're considering. Yep. Are there any thoughts on this particular alternative proposal at this point?
This is increasing the number.
Yeah, this is a number of different options, I suppose, could come into this one from the Mosgiel only going into Dunedin, based on the scope of submissions, the Strathtyre, Mosgiel, all of Dunedin City's boundary, I guess it is. And then what else we got? Adding to going to 13 as well is another one. Council Laws.
Yes, I can see just at the moment as the rates demands hit the Otago region that the whole of Dunedin are clamouring for an extra councillor for the ORC. I'm being facetious, I know, but I don't know that this is really an option. Listen, I have an enormous amount of sympathy. I think again I'll be always dominated by the numbers. This again will solve itself in the future, but I don't see the need to increase the number of councillors around our table. Again, it's not something we've consulted on, but I know how unpopular it will be in the electorate at constituency. It's dissolved to solve a problem. And I'll just say to Dunedin councillors, and I don't mean, I'm trying not to be offensive or upsetting in any way, but surely it's the quality of people you have around the table. It's not so where you come from so much. The population of Dunedin has been static for a long time now. The population of Central Otago and Queenstown has grown, that's just it. And all that happens is that your representation simply follows your population. I don't know why Dunedin people would feel threatened losing a constituency member. To have 5 constituency members satisfying that over a relatively confined geographic space still gives them plenty of representation. So I can't see that moving from 12 to 13 solves any problems. I think it creates perception issues for the council.
Thanks. There were a number of points there that would be out of scope for consideration. One would be remuneration. We can't consider that, and also we don't know what it would do to rates, because the Remuneration Authority might consider to retain the current pool and just So, sorry, I thought you were talking about.
I said nothing about salaries at all.
Okay.
No.
Unpopularity of increasing.
No, popularity of having another councillor, full stop.
I see. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, misunderstood. So that's all good. That's cool. And the other one is speaking for the population instead of what the scope of the submissions say. But yeah, thank you. I've got your points. Councillor Malcolm.
So can I refer directly to a submission?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So I just refer you to submission number 4, actually, which is from a reasonably important area in Otago called the Clutha District Council, which their they are very strong in continuing to push the proposal that we sent out, and particularly reinforcing the size of their district, the area that's currently served, and the need for their two representatives. So they're very much sitting on the status quo.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm still making up my mind about the Upper Lakes and the Dunedin issue, but I will point out that regardless that, you know, the Dunedin city has put together a pretty compelling sort of case. Like when you look at the numbers, if I'm right, page 67 of 74, if there's 5 councillors to be representing Dunedin City, it would have a percentage of 8.57, which is just under the 10%. So we're creating something that is at the upper ceiling. Whereas if you compare that with the table that was actually on there with the 13, not that I'm a fan of 13, it was basically minus 2%, which is closer to the target of 0. So from a numbers situation, like having 5 councillors in Dunedin, where we're pushing the ceiling of percentage, we're certainly not meeting a target.
Sorry, Brian, could you explain that again?
Well, I'm just simply saying that on page 67,
just when you're going to 13?
No, 12.
12, okay.
I'm 12. I'm simply saying, just pointing out for myself or for nobody else that
you're pushing the 10%.
Yeah, you're pushing the 10%. So like it's not as if we're going in and, you know, like the previous I previously referred to West Harbour saying, well, in 2025 it'll go above 10%. I don't know if that's true, and it's not relevant information, but I certainly know from this number it will be close. We're setting up something that will be close. Whereas,
but the other one doesn't work either. So it's 11.67. If you look at, turn the page again, and then if you turn the page again to go to 13, it's 13.86.
Not necessarily. See, on that table there, the bottom table has the need that you've reduced from.
Yeah, no, that's the DCC. That's not our. Sorry, look, you're looking at the wrong figures, mate. Both those two there are from the DCC, isn't it? The alternative DCC are the submitters.
Our numbers.
So it's a Dunedin proposal, but of our numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like that actually.
And if I can explain the two tables, so the top table has both Mosgiel Taieri and Strathtyre going into the Dunedin constituency. The DCC submission talked about Strathtyre being a maybe. So the bottom table is modelling Strathtyre staying in Molyneux and Mosgiel Taieri going to Dunedin. And that's where it sits within the plus or minus 10% if you do it that way.
Yeah.
On our numbers.
Or if you had 13 councillors, the 13, you bring that one up there.
That's it, doesn't work in Mairaki.
It doesn't work in.
But we're always overdone anyway.
Yeah. What's happened in Mairaki?
Well, you'll seem to forget that happens all the time. So,
and the reason that changes is because if you move to 13 councillors, you're dividing the whole population by 13 instead of 12. So your ratios change, which is why Mairaki then pops up as non-compliant when it's compliant in all the other ones.
Oh, we can take some of them.
I've got
And it's plus or minus too. It's not
The
just
flooded,
if it's
the
above,
flooded,
it's
we'll
a
take
problem.
them.
If it's below, it's a problem too. Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you go down to?
Right. So we got a lot of chat going on here. Looks like we've probably had everyone speak on this one that wants to at the moment in terms of reasoning. We're on to Councillor Noon.
I haven't made any comment up until now. And just in general terms, I've struggled to justify moving away from the proposal that we put out some time ago. So that's my thinking.
Yep. No,
That's
that's
obviously taking
fine.
on board what's been said through the submission process, but like the discussion we've just had, it just shows you how difficult it is to try and slice the pie up any other way other than what we've suggested in the initial proposal.
Yeah, so we got Keith. Right, I'm just going to check because we're going to probably have a whole lot of people that want to talk generally, I'd imagine, at this point. Amanda, do we need to cover off all the other ones as well that we've received?
So I guess just as a really high level summary, some of the other comments that were made throughout the submissions, which are broadly incorporated in the key themes, were, yeah, population-based representation is inappropriate. But obviously we're bound by the legislative direction around that. Smaller populations in places like Terrace need local government support to ensure local values are reflected. There was talk about upcoming large developments, meaning they support the Dunstan proposal to have more councillors. There's that future growth planning comment around reducing Dunedin. There was a direction to reduce Dunedin by one and don't add another. Support for Mosgiel Taieri having more representation, and that rural, that was the thing that came out of the Fed Farmers submission, was just around that, needing people around the table who adequately represent rural issues. So they were just wanted to reflect those. And then I guess there was also some out of scope feedback, and so the legislation directs that you council don't have to consider out of scope feedback. So some of that was on budgets and staff numbers, some of that was on iwi representation, some of it was specifically on PT, and then that wider local government reorganisation piece. So we've just recorded them there though, as to reflect that we noted those themes, but they're out of scope of this. And then what we did for the rest of the presentation, and I've just actually added these slides in, was just reflecting on the numbers on some of those amended proposals that were put forward, but you've already talked to that, so I don't think I need to go through it, but I'm very happy to if you'd like me to.
Thanks. Some of those other themes around growth as well, I suppose we've already talked about as well, wouldn't be within scope.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing, but that's it. Yep. Right, so Councillor Noon, you've had a general comment about where we're at this point. There were some other hands up over here. Gary, you were one of them.
Yep, from a general perspective, I support the initial proposal. Thanks.
Are we going to vote? Are we going to?
Yeah, we're going to formally come back to our council paper and recommendations, which have that initial proposal. Yep, prepare the initial proposal for adoption as the final proposal, or request alterations to the initial proposal on the basis of the submissions received. So that's what we've been doing, working towards being able to make our minds up on those. So yeah, if anyone else wants to say generally, but we will have a formal motion, which we could speak to as well, I guess. Yep, Councillor Metham.
Well, generally, I'm finding this whole process rather awkward. It would be nice if somebody else had worked it out for us. It just seems like there's sort of a bit of self-interest, but we're not trying to promote that. But just from my point of view, and it's not for any personal reasons, I've always considered Mosgiel part of Dunedin, and for me, that's. Out of all of us, it seems to me where perhaps some sort of adjustment has to be made in my mind to allow for that. I mean, I've got the hill last night. It took 13 minutes to get to Mosgiel. It is part of Dunedin. It's part of the TA. It's part of the rugby scene. It's always been part of Dunedin. So I mean, that's my thinking there. But at the same time, I don't want to see an area underrepresented either, like mine. So, wish somebody else could make this decision for us.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it, with a diverse region like Otago? Councillor McCall.
Just briefly, I think if you were going to make a change and have Molyneux turn into basically Clutha and have the rest of it coming into Dunedin, you'd have to, and I think there is definitely a case for that. That is an issue that you've got one person representing an area, but we already have an area like that in Moeraki. The only thing is we would have to go through a process of getting a dispensation because we'd be outside the 10% on numbers. And so, but in saying that, there's probably a pretty good case to get a dispensation given the the size of the area, et cetera, and it all being a farming dominated area. So I don't see an issue with that. Probably, but we do, although we, in this process, we can't think forward, but long term, you're going to have to think about what is the best way for rural areas to get representation, because there's nothing sure that in 6 years' time, there's going to be a whole lot more people in the Queenstown Lakes district area. Yes. There's probably going to be a few more in Dunedin, and pretty confident that Ranfurly and Balclutha will still have about the same number. So there's like the population shift going on all the time. So yeah, it's a bigger question. But so I suppose I'm probably in favour of the proposal that we've got now. And only because I don't think that I think the numbers aren't quite there for the Upper Lakes to have a proper community of interest like a dead shore bet one, but they're definitely coming, and we've got to recognise that. But I do, I don't know, we're just going to worry. I really worry about how the overall representation is going to be, and whether I don't know, maybe better only have one person rather than two, because if you have two, I'm talking about Molyneux, like you can easily get two people out of Mosgiel representing all of Clutha, because there's been no one representing Clutha. I suppose Stephen Woodhead is on the edge, I guess, yeah. But yes, so there's risks both ways. So sorry, I just went around in a big circle.
No, it is the conundrum, really. We've got two dense populations that are either far ends of our region and a whole lot of ground in between.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Councillor Wilson.
I'm really happy with what we put forward. They can be conundrums, we make big issues out of them. I represent every part of my ward happily. And it's a total privilege. And I don't think where I live actually determines what I represent. It may bias my understanding, but that is why I love going out in the community and learning about it. My biggest regret is that when you look at that map proportionately, it's the travel that is not taken into account, and that is my biggest concern in the Dunstan ward. While it looks big, it's actually made more difficult because of its rather complicated roading system. If we put the lakes and the mountains in the way of, and makes it really torturous to represent. The one big significant change that we have done this year is look at single transferable vote, and that makes a representation in these wards by area. If you are a good representative and will represent a community of interest strongly or preferably more than one, that makes it much easier for the parts of for various large population parts to get a representative, which wasn't the case in the past. There was an absolute bias the other way. So I'm confident that this step will be both steps combined, bring the one change in the, two changes in the numbers and the STV, gives us a really fair representation as best as we can get, given the boundaries that we have to accept from the TAs and from the numbers we've got.
Thank you. Councillor Oars.
I don't want to overestimate the impact of STV in a multi-member ward system. So in a place like Dunstan, it won't make really any difference, or in Dunedin, really. You're still going to get but it will make a massive difference if it's in a single ward system. And a good example of that would be the mayoralty of the Dunedin of two elections ago, I think. Can I just say, though, that there are no perfect systems. I have considerable sympathy for Alexa Forbes' point of view of having of the Queenstown Lakes District Council. I have considerable sympathy for Mosgiel. This issue will solve itself by the population the next time this representation review comes along. There is no perfect solution. This is the best option. So I'm leaning toward Lloyd's view, and that is we endorse the proposal of the staff on this particular issue.
Right, well, we might be moving to there's no other hands up for general roundup, so we might be moving to the more formal part unless there's other matters that we need to consider, Amanda or Stephen. No?
All right. So do we just need to move the recommendations, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I'm just checking we've all good. We can just move straight into that section. We don't need an adjournment to get organised. No, good, okay. So yeah, the recommendation, there's a number of them there. Just flip to your council pages there.
Can I
Oh,
move?
thanks, Kylie. That'll be great. She'll just put them up on the screen.
Can I move then A, B, C, D, A? And A will mean that E becomes irrelevant.
Yep. Sorry, seconder for that. Councillor Wilson. I'll just check there's no questions about process or anything here before we get into debate. Appears not to be.
Sorry, you're deleting E.
Yeah, so the final word, Brian, will be final proposal and then the full stop. So you're deleting all the words after proposal.
And either before A.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So have we got the words after 2024 full stop?
Yeah.
Getting rid of A.
It's stop raining, is it? Oh, is it?
No.
When's the rain? Need to be this afternoon.
Oh, Councillor Ware has a question. Yeah.
Just based on the wording, so presumably that will come.
Yeah.
Does that just come to us in a future council meeting for final?
Yes, that will come on the 23rd of October with the correct resolutions and the public notification, all of that stuff to support that decision to be made. Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
I have nothing more to say that's been added to the moment. I might have something at the end, but
okay. Yeah.
I think everything's been said.
Other people that want to enter the debate? Yep, Councillor Meath on
Just a clarification, then if we were requiring an alteration to the initial proposal, it's not covered in this motion. Is it just assumed that if this is passed?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah,
Okay.
process question,
So,
yes.
I mean, can we have a division across this as well?
Sure.
It's only
Yep.
four of them.
If you call one, anyone's allowed to call a division and we must do it, yep. Sorry, Councillor Scott.
Cool. I came into this debate thinking that I would vote for alterations to the initial proposal. And my reasons for that were the Upper Lakes, for all the reasons that I articulated earlier. But that whole issue became a little bit confusing around the Cromwell issue because QLDC were promoting Queenstown wanted from Cromwell. And then we saw the indecision. Maybe Cromwell hadn't been given the opportunity for that discussion. It certainly went against what CODC Mayor was saying. In relation to Dunedin, I do have some reservations. The fact that the percentage is up near the 10%. So we're really forward-looking in terms of the 5 councillors. But there is the opportunity. I mean, Mosgiel potentially will still have a councillor if somebody stands for Mosgiel and they get the support in the future. I mean, one of the other thoughts that's been going through my mind is at the end of the day, the council has got to be a functional council. And one of the strengths of this proposal is that it does actually give opportunity. It enables typically a minimum of 2 councillors, excluding Meraki. So that issue of, that was raised, if one gets sick or one wants to take a holiday, there's still representation. So there's that issue, and also there's people and councillors that are on top of the rural issues because they're actually spending time in these areas, which the more we urbanise the councillor, the more distance they could become from understanding those issues. So at the end of the day, my long-winded speech is that I will support the proposal as it stands, to my surprise, but also acknowledging that, as I think Councillor Laws said, that there's some trends there that at some point will need to be addressed, particularly Upper Lakes. Thank you.
Any further speakers?
Alexa.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Well, I will be calling for a division. I think Tim's already done that. The one option that we actually haven't explored at all today, and it didn't feature heavily in the submissions because I don't think it was preferred, was the ability to have 2 councillors for Arrowtown and Queenstown alone. So we haven't explored that. I'm not exactly happy with where we got to.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt you on. It's important that we have robust process, and I don't think that was. Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm happy with the process. I'm not arguing that. We have seen that one come up. Anyway, so I won't be able to vote for option 4. I don't think we've got it right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor Meetham.
Look, for me, the only stumbling block is really the Upper Lakes area. I'm okay with Dunedin going down to 5, but I do feel it's important that some consideration is given to developing the Upper Lakes constituency, which is the only reason why I won't support 4A. Thanks.
Councillor Weir.
Yeah, so I say my comments earlier on the individual proposals because my thoughts sort of flow from each other, so bear with me. But like as we've covered, we plan for growth when it comes to zoning and housing and actual planning activities, but it's not an option when it comes to representing the people who currently reside in these places. So it's not something we can consider in these decisions. I don't think there's any perfect or even ideal proposals, but out of the options in scope, I think the current proposal is the best at balancing those range of competing interests and also appears to have that overwhelming support from submitters with 83% saying yes. While many of the no submissions seem to be a protest of the council generally, there were also plenty of no submissions from residents of Dunedin and also Wanaka, with Dunedin residents understandably upset at losing a councillor, as well as concerns that the whole of Dunedin City isn't captured within the constituency. And I definitely sympathise with those concerns. Wanaka and to an extent Queenstown residents highlighted that distinct urban communities in that area that they believe warranted a distinct Upper Lakes constituency. And 2 of our local councils supported the proposal. 2 had slightly alternative ideas, largely in line with those community concerns I just mentioned. And I think that all 4 of those submissions raised really valid points and questions that we should take forward when we think about this next time. Because I think the initial proposing is the best option moving forward, and in future we should take a bit of a broader look at this. We need to, I think, decide if we're comfortable with 1-person constituencies or if we're comfortable with large area constituencies, because both have problems, but it's not possible to have neither. We also need to take a look at how single transferable vote will affect our elections and how that might change things. And I think we should be willing to look at the number of councillors around the table in future, as well as explore how to make Wanaka and other Upper Lakes communities' voices heard more effectively, whether that's through different representation or whether that's simply a matter of doing better work, providing public transport and being just more present in those communities. I think the future of local government will look very different, and maybe these boundaries and numbers will be drawn up by an independent commission or something. But until then, it's up to us, and the option in front of us today seems like the most sensible. Cool.
Thanks, Councillor Weir. Nobody else. Councillor Malcolm.
Yep.
Yep.
So when I weigh up the submissions, a large proportion of the submissions were based on growth projections that were not the relevant figures that we were able to use. I'm not denying the opportunity to express those opinions, but I had to put those aside because they were not the figures that we are to make our decision on. There's one point, we are the Environmental Council. To look at our job role is to look after the environment of Otago. 1.6% of Otago is urban. So it's absolutely critical that we have a spread of people that understand the other 98.4% of the area. It's absolutely critical. And that's not saying that the people in those areas don't understand it, but it would be fair to say that the better spread of people we have, the better. Any proposal that reduces constituencies of large geographic areas to one representative is foolhardy and should be looked at even under health and safety obligations of a council. So any of those proposals weighed poorly with me. So the proposal, yes, I agree with the other previous speakers that it's not perfect, but will be up to Queenstown, it will be up to Wanaka if they feel that they are not correctly represented, to put representatives up, because if this proposal goes ahead, they will have the opportunity to have 4 people from that area. They need to put good people up. They are the bulk of the population, so put good people up, get them voted upon, and simple answer, job done. Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a requirement, obviously, this sort of representation review process that we have to undertake from time to time, every 6 years or whatever. And I know back in 2012, when the Otago Regional Council at that time had 11 members round the table, and during one of these processes, they moved to 12 members. And the reason why they did that was the considerable growth that was occurring in the Dunstan constituency. So here we are 12 years down the track, discussing exactly the same issue that we're confronted with. And the only difference really here is that we're suggesting that we reshuffle the existing numbers of representatives around the region rather than adding one. So although it's not a perfect, as others have referred to, outcome, but I feel comfortable that we notify the current initial proposal, which becomes our official proposal, because that, I think, achieves, at this point, in our view, around the table, fair and effective representation. And I think it just highlights once again the uniqueness of the Otago region when you consider the vast differences between the East Coast and further inland, whether it's Central or Upper Lakes, and even going north and south of Dunedin to the Clutha and the Mauraki constituencies. So yeah, we look forward to the process unfolding in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Callagher.
Thank you. If say all of the proposals that were put forward by submitters were actually run with, then potentially I think we were setting up total change of direction for the council and its representation around urban being well represented with multiple positions, and then potentially 3 large geographical areas with 1 position. And I think, as has been highlighted by Councillor Malcolm, all of the issues around the ability for that to function, I think, is not a good direction to go. So as those submitters were putting that forward, I think their intent would have solved a situation for themselves, not thinking much about what it creates for the balance areas. So I think the best outcome that we have on the table for us now is what was initially proposed, and that has been largely supported across the region. So thank you.
Thanks. No one else?
Yes,
Councillor, probably everything's been said that I wanted to say, but I'll be supporting the proposed option as well. Yeah, again, I think Councillor Ware outlined there's a whole range of matters to do with how fair it is, I suppose, for regions that are as big as ours with a sparser population sometimes. And I think to be fairly represented, and what does that mean? I think that Dunedin will have statistically right on the border of whether it should have another councillor or not. But I think it is fairly represented because it's a smaller area and actually is a majority urban area. It's not, in my mind, as diverse as some others. And I think that 5 would represent it. As for some of the other areas, which may not have as much population, they still require representation in my review, and fair representation. And that's a lot of our region falling into that category. And yes, we've heard proposals around inland Otago as well, and yeah, I think the proposal meets those, and we've heard some reasons about that as well. But one extra representative for that area seems fair to me as well. And we've heard from Central Otago and from Queenstown who had slightly differing views. But I think on balance of weighing up both of those views, the one extra representative makes sense whilst retaining the existing boundary. So that's where I'm at. Right, anyone else quickly before I go back to Councillor Lawes for right of reply? Councillor McCall?
Just really quickly, I'm going to stick with the status quo. And probably I do understand the Upper Lakes area and how their desire to be have dedicated representation. But at the end of the day, it doesn't work. And at the end of the day, it only works if the Cromwell area comes in, and there's no commitment come from Cromwell to. It's just not mature enough to happen right now, I don't believe. So I think at the end of the day, the onus is on the areas that I feel like that they're not getting fairly representative, is to find and promote candidates that will represent their area how they desire. So I'll continue with what I said earlier on and stick with the proposal in front of us. Thank you.
Councillor Lawes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the views of councillors. The Otago region is changing and evolving, and we are marking that in a funny sort of way today. It is changing and evolving, and we are marking that in the representation phase of the Otago Regional Council today. It's interesting about the Dunstan ward is it isn't just the population that's changing, but also the huge proportion and the disproportionate amount of rates paid out of that particular area as well. It's extraordinarily striking that the majority of rates now out of the Central Otago and Queenstown Lakes of the general rates has been drawn just from that one ward. In many ways, though, we are making a pragmatic decision based upon population figures and recent growth, not projected growth, and we've heard the reasons why. We're constrained by the legislation and also by the assumptions that we could make about that, but that's the way the legislation works. And then, of course, we've got the overwhelming number of submissions in support of the proposal, that the draft proposal, of course, that the Otago Regional Council put forward. Finally, I've got this to say. I don't think this is our problem. Our problem is that we are set up as an organisation in which large numbers of people can't stand for council. And one of the real things, if we want to change representation around our table, isn't from where people come from, but making ourselves more accessible to people, particularly wage and salary earners, so that they can stand for council and they can get elected. And at the moment, there's a powerful disincentive for all Otago people to stand for the region because we're not set up that way. And I think that challenge remains to us. Madam Chair, for that reason, I support this motion.
Thank you. Right, well, we've got a division and you've, oh,
Should we
sorry.
do 1 to 3 without a division and then just do 4 as a division? I think that's what they'll call, just make it quicker for the poor division person.
Thank you.
Just checking what the 3 is. Yeah, it's just the acknowledging and thanking as well. Yeah. So there's one on noting the, oh, if we just put them back up again, Kylie, that'd be good. Yeah, noting the report and acknowledging and thanking the submitters, and then acknowledging and thanking those submitters that came in to present as well. So yeah, we'll put the first, oh, you're happy to put the first 3 together, councillor Laws?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, okay. We'll put that then, all in favour?
Aye.
Yes.
Carried. Now on to the next one with the division. Which is, yeah, 4.
All right, we're doing this.
The whole thing with the A, yeah.
Councillor Forbes,
No.
Councillor Callagher,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
Yes.
Councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
Councillor McCall,
Yes.
Councillor Methven,
No.
Councillor Noon,
Yes.
Councillor Scott,
Yes.
Councillor Somerville is away, sorry, Councillor Weir,
Yes.
Councillor Wilson,
Yes.
and Councillor Robertson.
Yes. Motion is carried. Thank you. Right. Brings us to a close of this particular hearing and council meeting. So yeah, once again, we have formally there moved some motions to thank submitters. Also those that came in person, but to all submitters, we do thank you for really careful and considered responses, which helped us to make our, well, not to make our decisions, to make our recommendations today. So yeah, huge thanks. A big thanks to Stephen, who's been with us through this process for a while and offering great advice, and to Amanda for a huge amount of work as well to bring us to where we are, and a bit more to come as well as we move through the process. Next thing will be a council meeting to consider the recommendations as well. And thanks heaps to councillors for all participating today and thrashing around some ideas. And as we said, there's no perfect outcome here, but being willing to take on board all the submissions and to listen to each other today, I think it was a really good process. So thanks everyone. I'll just close. We'll just have a karakia at the end of the day today, I think. Thank you very much, everyone. We are now complete.